Wood bison were declared extinct in the 1900s until a tiny herd was found in a remote section of Canada.
2 centuries ago, millions of bison shaped entire ecosystems across North America. Then they nearly vanished. In a bold experiment, a small group was airlifted into one of the harshest environments on Earth. What happened next surprised even the scientists who led the mission. Within months, something unexpected began to unfold in the frozen wilderness. It wasn't just survival. It was the beginning of a transformation that would challenge everything we thought we knew about nature and restoration.
If you liked the video, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and stay with us for more.
The Bison Effect. In June 1980, a helicopter lifted 28 sedated wood bison into a remote river valley near the 61st parallel in Canada's Northwest Territories. This was deep subarctic wilderness. These animals were North America's largest land mammals, and they had been hunted to the brink of extinction. At one point, the entire global population of wood bison survived in a single forest clearing. This wasn't just a typical conservation release, it was a test to see if a species nearly wiped out could truly recover, and a test to see what would happen when it returned. 8 months later, biologists flew back in the depths of winter. They expected to find a few survivors struggling to endure the cold. Instead, they found a thriving herd with newborn calves. That discovery triggered a decades-long ecological transformation. The return of the wood bison would prove that a single animal can reshape an entire ecosystem in ways no human engineering could ever replicate. To understand why, we have to go back. For 60 million years, bison shaped North America. Just 200 years ago, nearly 60 million bison roamed from Alaska to Mexico. They were the continent's dominant grazers, maintaining vast grasslands, riverbanks, and meadows. They supported wolves, bears, ravens, and countless plant species that depended on their grazing and movement. By 1889, that was destroyed. Commercial hunting, sport hunting, and military policies aimed at starving indigenous peoples reduced the entire continental population to around 541 animals. The wood bison subspecies, adapted to the cold boreal forest, survived a little longer in remote northern refuges, but even they were declared essentially extinct by the 1940s after disease spread from introduced plains bison. Then, in 1957, a bush pilot spotted a small herd near the Nyarling River. Biologists confirmed these were genetically pure wood bison. About 200 animals had survived in isolation. This discovery launched reintroduction efforts, but there was a major problem. Tom Young, Yukon's senior wildlife biologist, later noted that early programs lacked meaningful consultation with indigenous peoples whose traditional lands would be affected. Between 1988 and 1992, 170 wood bison were moved into Yukon's Nisling River watershed. The animals came from Elk Island National Park, the Toronto Zoo, and private facilities. But the Champagne and Aishihik First Nations were not meaningfully consulted. The Cascadena people raised immediate concerns. They warned about damage to trap lines, meadows, berry bushes, heritage sites, and even grave sites. This disconnect led to years of difficult work. By the early 2000s, a new co-management framework finally emerged, involving territorial wildlife managers and 4 First Nation governments. Hunting licenses and population targets were negotiated together. It was a slow shift, but an essential one toward genuine indigenous involvement in wildlife restoration. Meanwhile, the bison themselves were thriving. The Yukon population grew from 170 to roughly 500 by 1998. By 2011, it had surpassed 1,200, and by 2022, nearly 2,000 adults roamed the region. That was exponential growth in just 30 years. But something even more important was happening. The bison were not just surviving, they were actively rebuilding the subarctic ecosystem. Ecologists call this ecosystem engineering, and wood bison do it in 4 powerful ways. First, grazing. Bison selectively eat dominant grasses. This creates a patchwork of different grass heights and exposed soil. That patchwork promotes plant species diversity far better than cattle grazing or human restoration ever could. Second, wallowing. On dry ground, bison roll on their sides, creating shallow depressions about 2 meters wide and 30 centimeters deep. These fill with water and become micro-wetlands. They support aquatic insects, amphibians, and nesting shorebirds. A single wallow increases habitat complexity for dozens of species. Third, dung. A bison produces large quantities of manure. This fertilizes the soil, feeds insect populations, and provides food for insectivorous birds. It turns a barren forest floor into a nutrient-rich hub of activity. Fourth, physical interaction. Bison rub against trees and use their horns to strip bark. This kills some trees, especially young ones at the forest edge. By doing so, they prevent forest encroachment and maintain the open grasslands that so many other species depend on. Remember those first aerial surveys after the 1980 release? The biologists found not only survivors but calves. That was proof. These animals could endure and reproduce in one of the harshest climates on the continent, and their instinct to engineer the landscape was not learned. It was innate. It had been waiting in their DNA for generations. Much of the success traces back to one place, Elk Island National Park in Alberta. In 1965, just 22 wood bison were transferred there. Elk Island maintained a disease-free herd, carefully monitored genetics, and grew the population at an astonishing 20 to 25% annually. That herd became a genetic seed bank, enabling reintroductions across the continent. The cost of moving bison by helicopter is tiny compared to the enormous expense of trying to replicate their ecological functions artificially. You cannot helicopter in new wetlands. You cannot airdrop fertilized soil mosaics. Only the bison can do that work. As Tom Jung said, bison share a deep evolutionary history with these landscapes, dating back to the era of woolly mammoths. They belong here, and as they returned, the rest of the food web returned with them. Within years, wolves began preying on the reintroduced bison. Grizzly bears followed. Scavengers returned. The full predator-prey dynamic of the boreal forest began to re-establish itself, all because one keystone species came home. Today, the wood bison's status remains fragile. Only 14 free-ranging populations exist globally. The largest herd, the Mackenzie herd in the Northwest Territories, once numbered about 2,400 before an anthrax outbreak. The Nahanni population, which started with those 28 bison in 1980, had grown to around 400 by 2004. Yukon's Aishihik herd now numbers roughly 2,000, but the work continues. In Alaska, 130 wood bison were released into the Yukon-Innoko River area in 2015. It was the first time wild wood bison had been seen in Alaska in nearly 100 years. Calves were born that same year. By 2017, survival rates were increasing and birth timing was shifting earlier in the season. And remarkably, in 2006, wood bison were introduced to the Republic of Sakha in eastern Russia. They serve as a proxy for the extinct steppe bison. By 2019, the species was officially listed for conservation in Yakutia, and a second herd was established in 2020. Wood bison are now active agents of ecological restoration across 3 continents. So let us return to that moment in 1980. 28 sedated bison airlifted into a remote river valley. No one knew if they would survive. No one could predict the cascade of life that would follow. Decades later, those animals and their descendants have not only survived, they have restored food webs, plant diversity, and habitat complexity across thousands of square miles. They have transformed isolated populations into interconnected herds spanning multiple provinces and territories. They have forced wildlife managers and indigenous nations to build new ways of working together, and they have shown the world what real restoration looks like. Tom Jung, the ecologist who has studied them for years, put it best. He said, "They have attitude. They don't care about people. They never did. They were here first. And after everything that happened in the century between near extinction and this morning, they are here again." The bison effect is not just about bringing back an animal. It is about returning an entire ecosystem to itself. And sometimes, the most powerful restoration tool is simply getting out of the way and letting a keystone species do what it has done for 60 million years.